on where the patient stands at that time in terms of deductible and out-of-pocket maximums, and you'll take the deposit based on the the most current up-to-date information, and then when the claim is actually adjudicated, then there'd be some process for reconciling, and if you've taken more money than the patient owed, then you pay the patient back. There is a concept we've seen discussed with some payers about whether or not there should be some sort of stop-loss protection in the event that the bad debt related to these products becomes unbearable, and whether or not perhaps that would trigger some adjustment in the rate, something along those lines. So, I would encourage people to think about that. Are there ways that you can protect yourself, if the bad debt increases beyond what's manageable? And then, again, with termination rights, you want to make sure that your contract. We always try to negotiate something which does not have a termination date only tied to or termination right only tied to the renewal date or the anniversary date. We see this a lot with physicians. So the payers say, all right, well, you can get out, you can give us 180 days notice or whatever it is, and the termination will be effective on the next anniversary date or renewal date. You should always, in my opinion, try to negotiate language which allows you to get out at any time on that notice, okay? I've seen it too often where providers end up, they don't figure it out, but they want to get out 180 days in advance. They figured out on 175 days in advance. Now they've missed their time frame, and now they're locked in for another year. So if you have the ability to negotiate that, I think that's very important to maintain your own flexibility, and particularly with a product like this, which we don't really know how it's going to pan out. So I think there's really not all that much more to it from the legal perspective in terms of contracting. I think, for parting advice, I think we would say flexibility is the key. You want to try and maintain the ability to get out on a reasonable advance notice, and you want to be vigilant in terms of what your notice requirements are, and make sure that you are, making your evaluation of how the product is going far enough in advance that you can exercise that right to get out and not get locked in for a longer period. That's really it. That's my spiel. So.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Take questions now or afterwards.
My brother's a lawyer, and he says, "Don't you dare sign it until you ask me first." So that's the advice you'll get from me. But don't sit down. Are there any questions that anyone in the audience would like to ask? And,
the only thing I would say is, I'm in a practice that's been around for a few years, and a lot of our contracts are already established, and so they are just a lot of addendums at this point going on further. So we don't have really the opportunity to negotiate new contracts. And I did once with one of our large providers, did try to get a contract renegotiated. It took me months to get it. And it still wasn't right. I mean, I just don't know. Your advice is great, but I don't know.
Well, I think if you are in a contract like that's been going on forever, and there's a series of amendments, I think you look for an opportunity where maybe there's some other change being made to the contract, and you try and work that